has context around it, that you could tell what time and place this occurred. Thirdly, we have now arguments like this. Now, let me give you another argument that I find repeated all over the place, and many different pro-Israel spokespeople bring this up, and it's a sign of where you stand. And that statement goes like this: that says, look, there are 50 plus Islamic countries. Why are they all refusing to take Palestinian refugees? Doesn't that say something about Palestinians? So that's another one of these arguments. I'm going to open up a couple doors here, and then you could take it away. The first one is that even a fact? Number one, because don't forget, it's sometimes there's trickery, sometimes there's straight up lies. So is that even a fact? That's number one. Number two, there is a trick of misdirection as well. Magicians, they have some very simple things like misdirections, right? My assistant will fall over there, right? Well, you can't resist watching the assistant fall. All the attention's going to go there. Well, something's happening with my right hand over here. That's just very simple misdirection. So wait a second, why are we even asking that question, right? Shouldn't we be asking the right question? Why are they refugees in the first place? And is it right to make them refugees? So again, so these are more tricks of the trade, and the marketing industry is an industry that can be used for good, or it's really backed by Iblis and his tricks. And this is just one of them. And I see so many people, repeat this question, and then you just see the comments, and they've achieved, because they're terrorists, because but you've accepted two of these premises or two of these tricks, and you've ingested them, and as a result, poison is growing in your heart now. So take it away on that statement.
I think you've answered it, but I think one thing that they've admitted in that statement is that they're creating refugees.
That's exactly it. Okay. Oh, by the way, before you continue, Leanne from Instagram, again, you come onto YouTube, is where you're going to find the recording, but also you'll find the full picture again.
Yeah, so they've admitted in that statement they're actually creating refugees. So what they've done is they've admitted to ethnic cleansing, or they've admitted to displacement. Mm-hmm. Well, you're in the wrong. You're already the aggressor. So there is a kind of hierarchy of things to do from a moral perspective. The first thing that we should aim to do is push back the aggressor, give people back their land. Yeah. Right? Allow people the right to return. That's the main thing we should be focusing on, not just accepting all of these refugees. Mm-hmm. So they're really kind of inadvertently admitted that they're the aggressor and they're creating refugees, right? The other thing to also point out is, well, is the statement factual in of itself? Mm-hmm. There are around 5 million Palestinian refugees all around the world, many of them in Jordan and other places. I think for every 10 refugees, I think 3 of them are Palestinian, or even maybe more. And from that perspective, where are these refugees? They've been taken in by many Arab countries. So the statement itself is not factual at all. Yeah. And also, we could also misdirect in a positive way. We could say, okay, well, since there are refugees, what is the legal status of these refugees? And according to international law, they have a legal right to return. Mm. And this is something very important, right? So you could just reframe it and say, no, this is the wrong discussion. These refugees, they have a legal right to return. Why aren't we asking that question? Yeah. Because for every question, it hides another question that is more valid, right? Yeah. So that's something that we need to push back on and say, well, why don't we give these refugees back their home? Isn't that the right thing to do? Unless you want to make them permanent refugees. Is that what you're implying? Mm-hmm. Right? So that's very, very important. Also, what it does, it kind of moralizes their campaign. And they like saying, well, this is a necessary evil to create all of these refugees. So can you please take them? Saying, no, what you're doing, you're the one who's the aggressor. So what you do is you just focus back on the point that what you're doing in creating these refugees is illegal. It's based on apartheid. It's based on ethnic cleansing. It's based on decades of, one could argue systematic, over a period of time, a form of systematic genocide, right? So from that perspective, those are the kind of things that we could push back on by just, number one, finding out what other question they're hiding, Number two, what key assumptions that they have, and unpacking them and discussing their coherence or their lack of evidence. And also another thing that's very important to highlight is to understand what they are implying, because
Yep.
they're implying that they are actually creating these refugees. Oh,
Yep.
so if it was a media situation, I would say to them, because don't forget, this is not just a philosophical exercise, it's also a kind of emotional intelligence media exercise. So if someone said
Yep.
to me, why aren't these Arab countries taking on these refugees? Like, well, before we should even answer that really nonsensical question, we have to really find out why they're refugees in the first place. Oh, and when we find out why they're refugees, it's because of genocide, apartheid, aggression, tyranny, illegal occupation. So isn't that the right question that we should be asking?
Yep.
That
So
we shouldn't be creating these refugees in the first place? That the right question should be, there's a hierarchy of moral questions.
yeah.
Not take the refugees. It is stop creating these refugees and stop creating the tyranny that is producing these refugees. So we have to learn to basically what you call turn the tables from that perspective.
Analogy is always a great example. You gave them, Muhammad Hijab gave the analogy of the rapist. How about the analogy of someone stealing a car? Okay. You see a guy victimizing a driver, beating him up, stealing his car, then turning to you and saying, hey, you mind giving this guy a ride? Right?
Yeah.
Well, hold on a second. Am I now complicit in this theft? There's another layer to this. If I say, yeah, I'll give him a ride, I just made your theft easier, right?
Yep. Yeah.
And somebody had called it that the liberals will come in to try to appear sensitive to the victim, but in reality, they're doing Zionists a favor by announcing, hey, we'll take all the refugees. Like we want to take 100,000 refugees. We want to take 10,000 refugees. It appears that you're sympathizing with these Palestinians. You want to help them, right? In reality, this is the end result that the Zionists wanted. They want to empty the land, right?
Yes.
So there's another layer to that, in that, hold on, this is an act of complicity, and this is why Malcolm X, he said the liberal is far worse, morally far worse, right, than the racist who's telling you he wants to kill you. Because this guy, he's living with the conservative in the same in the same world, and he's doing the same thing while appearing sensitive and sympathetic. Right.
And also, another layer is also that, well, if they're refugees, and the reason that there are refugees, they're being occupied and expelled and ethnically cleansed. Well, according to the UN General Assembly, and according to additions, I think Protocol 1 of the Geneva Conventions, these people have a right to resist, by the way, a legal right to pick up arms and resist.
By every law.
People are not aware of that.
Yep.
This is international law that if people are occupied, people are being ethnically cleansed, according to the UN General Assembly, according to Geneva Conventions, additions to the Geneva Conventions, that they can actually have an armed struggle.
Yes.
But when you talk about thought experiments, I did a video on reframing the narrative, and I felt thought experiments were very, very good. So I gave an example about London. Imagine France occupied London for 75 years.
Yeah.
Okay, illegal occupation of London by the French for 75 years. And they ethnically cleansed hundreds of thousands of Brits. And they implemented an apartheid system. And they were tyrannical, and they would kill children in the hundreds over a couple of years, right? What would the international community do, my friend? It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
There is people talk about this whole conflict. It's not even a conflict, this crisis, in a kind of symmetrical way. There is no symmetry here. It's asymmetrical from a moral and even militaristic perspective. And we have to unpack that false assumption of symmetry, that it's Hamas versus Israel and the two equal powers and they're fighting, which is false. And even from a UK perspective, Hamas is a proscribed group, right? So Hamas and Islamic Jihad are proscribed terrorist groups according to UK law. But that discourse also hides something. There's a hidden assumption that there are no other legal factions that actually resist an occupation. There are other legal factions that are resisting occupation, and they are covered by international law. right? So that's another thing that you could bring into the discourse, into the equation.
So the refugee, you're saying the Gazan, the Palestinian, it does have a legal category, even if he doesn't have a state. He has a legal category of the ethnically cleansed who has the right to fight back.
And not just that, they have a right to actually, well, if they're in the conflict, from my understanding of the legal international law, if someone is an occupier and they're coming to occupy you and they're currently occupying, you have a legal right to resist. That's number one. Number two, if you're a refugee, especially the Palestinian refugees are going to the UN, they have a legal right to return.
Yeah.
Right? So this whole idea is you take these guys permanently is actually not in line with morality or even with international law. By the way, they're not always the same, morality and international law, by the way. But you know what I'm trying to say. So that's another thing that we need to basically start to unpack.
Yeah.
And slowly the pressure has, I think we're winning the online informational war. There is this politician, and he's the head of the Labour Party, and he's an absolute weasel. He is a weasel, a poor excuse of a politician and a poor excuse of a human being. He is a lawyer as well by trade. And his first statements were, you know, Israel has a right to defend itself, and Israel could basically turn off the water, turn off the electricity, stop the food, basically just, you know, break international law. And there was so much pressure on him within his party and external to it. And now he started to subtly change his discourse. It's not good enough for sure, but it goes to show that pressure and winning the information war is important. It's like it adds layers to the intellectual resistance, if you like. And you know, every drop raises the ocean. And that's why I've focused on my social media since it started, just purely like 99% or 95% just on what's happening in Palestine, because the whole Palestinian issue, because we have other issues as well. We've got the Uyghur issue. There's an illegal occupation there. There is a genocide happening in East Turkestan. And we're going to talk about this too, and we need to be vocal about this as well. But the thing about Palestine, from my perspective, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, Sheikh, it's civilizational, you know? From a dawah perspective, you know, the famous hadith where the nations will come and they'll be devouring the Muslims and will be big in number, will be like the foam or the scum of the sea. But the reason we're not going to be successful because of wahan, because of fear of death and love of the dunya. And Palestine, from my perspective, sits within